Let's get started. So agenda for today, our speaker today is Christopher Jones. Woo! And okay, so for Chris, he's going to share his story, and he's going to talk about research at Berkeley, environmental science and data science research, and also a little bit about grad school and the research path, and of course, lastly, about the bamboo ceiling. And then we will enter a short Q&A session, and after that, we will do the virtual picture together, okay? So first, I'm going to introduce you to Chris. Okay, so Chris is the director of CoolClimate Network and also program chair of Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, it's so good to be here. So first, let me just say, Kathy, I'm really pleased to be, participating in anything that you put together. Kathy is one of our best, brightest, nicest, most thoughtful students that I've ever had. Very creative, and I'm just really proud to see you taking this initiative. And really finding your own path, and that's what I've been doing my entire career. It's kind of those are some titles that I have, but really I'm constantly in a state of evolution, of evolving in my career. So I direct a program called the CoolClimate Network at Berkeley. I got my master's in energy and resources and Latin American studies, and then a PhD in ERG eventually. And I've been running this program for about 15 years now. So before I tell you more about the CoolClimate Network, because I know this is about your careers and kind of career path, and might be interested to see kind of how I got to my particular career. I guess, if there is any thread, it's really just been kind of following what I think is important and not really, I guess, what other people say is important, and really kind of listening to what you think where you can make your unique contribution in the world, and really building a set of skills that can help me carry out, those goals. So my passions took me all over the place. I was doing development work in Latin American studies, was doing civil rights work, and was also doing work. Actually, I found myself in Guatemala in the 90s just after the Civil War, and I was doing human rights work. And that got me leading to realize that poverty was the source of a lot of the conflict. And so I was really trying to work on poverty eradication, started working with Oxfam. And then as I was working on Oxfam on poverty eradication, I realized that the environment was playing a huge role in why people were struggling and were poor, and the access to resources. And that took me to a project in the Brazilian Amazon, working with my father and my brother on a program to extract logs from the Amazon River, of all things. So I spent a summer in 2000 on a boat with my father in the Amazon River, pulling logs out of the river, and our idea was to use the logs for money to reforest the Amazon, which led me to climate change and realizing, oh, well, there is the Kyoto Protocol and there's money that goes to reforestation. Why isn't it going to the coolest projects? And many times this is exactly, in fact, if I could put my finger on the biggest challenge of climate change, and perhaps of most other issues as well, is there's a massive misallocation of resources and talent to solve our problems. There's a lot of money that goes into climate change. In fact, this is the issue that I've become, to work on my last 15, 20 years of my life. There's tens of billions of dollars going into climate change mitigation and adaptation in California alone, yet our emissions are not going down any faster than the rest of the United States. In fact, the US emissions are going down faster than in California. So what are these tens of billions of dollars? Where are they going? What are these 500,000 people in California working on in the clean tech space? What are we all doing? And the problem is that we're all being very marginal. We're making just very marginal contributions. And so really, I think the best advice I have for you is to find where you can make your own unique contribution, and to build the skills and your kind of talents and resources to put you in a position to eventually to make your unique contribution. So that project got me to Berkeley. So I applied to Berkeley, actually in the Latin American Studies program for graduate school. I did my undergrad at UC Santa Cruz. Still trying to find myself back when it was actually a much better school than it is now. Anyway, so I actually spent 10 years traveling and working these projects around the world, and eventually applied to graduate school at Berkeley. And when they read my essay, because I was involved in a real world project, we had created this business plan. We had actually won a business plan competition at Columbia, and we're finalists in a business plan competition in Berkeley. And I actually spent my summer down in Brazil, like doing this project. They had said that that was one of the best letters that they had ever read in terms of an entrance exam or an entrance essay. So I think that real world experience of me like following my passions and ultimately applying that into a business, even though the business wasn't ultimately the success that we wanted it to be, it gave me the position like, now I need Berkeley. I need Berkeley to teach me about how to, well, there's so many skills that I needed, but I had like a real good use because I wanted to reforest the Amazon. So that got me into the Latin American Studies program. And as soon as I got to Berkeley, I realized, well, the professor I wanted to work with left. So that kind of left me stuck. I can't do forestry anymore. So I started taking classes at URG in the Energy Resources group. And I had taken so many classes at URG that they kind of forgot that I wasn't like already part of URG. But so I applied, and I'm like, they're like, of course, we'll let you into URG, which is a really difficult program to get into. I was really fortunate to be involved in that program. And that eventually led me to develop the work that I currently do. And so the idea was, if this money is not being allocated to these really cool agroforestry projects in Brazil, which are mainly like smallholder farmer projects, how can we get money to those projects? And the idea came to me to figure out our own impact as individuals, as businesses and communities eventually, but as individuals, to calculate your own carbon footprint, which is a term people didn't know of at the time, and then to use that, your carbon footprint profile to purchase carbon offsets and voluntarily give those carbon offsets to the projects that really need them. So that's why I ended up doing my master's project at URG, developing the carbon footprint calculator. This was back in 2003 to 2005. It was actually the first carbon footprint calculator. Amazingly, climate change we've known has been, is just as big of an issue, I will say 20 years ago, as it is today. Now more people are starting to recognize the consequences of climate change. But we've been working on climate change a long time, and nobody had figured out, nobody bothered to calculate a carbon footprint before. Like, and I can say that the holes in the research are just as big today, or even more, than existed back then. There are so many big and really important ideas out there that you're not going to find just by making marginal contributions, by joining somebody else's research project and doing what they say that you should do. Because the money, the project that they're working on is following the money, and the money is following the existing system. So if you want to make a real contribution, you need to think outside of that to find where you can use your talent to make the biggest impact. So this is kind of going now from my story into a little bit more about what CoolClimate does. So I developed the carbon calculator as my master's project and put it online, and it became very useful to people because if they found it, to the extent that it told them something new and different about something that they're interested in. And the average carbon footprint of the typical US household, or depending on where you live, depending on your household size, your income, and some other factors, it just generally surprises people. And that's important. So just for an example, your electricity, if you think about your carbon footprint, like everything that you do in your lifestyle that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, electricity is something that comes up. Yes, we need to get, have more efficient appliances and wean ourselves off the use of electricity in the summer, et cetera. But that's only 1% of your carbon footprint. That's surprising to most people. If you live in the East Bay, only 1% of your carbon footprint is from electricity. 15% is from your food. 50% almost is from your goods and services and all the indirect emissions from your entire lifestyle. So we developed the carbon calculator, and it was pretty simple, like Excel spreadsheet project back then. And then really started to realize that this needed to be a software project and a data science project, because we wanted to not just have an average carbon footprint and a simple calculator. We've actually developed many tools over the years as kind of building on that strength that we did of like that initial research, and then building it up into many other projects, and then building it outwards. So one of my pieces of advice, I would say, just kind of build on strength, like find an area that you're really interested in, build your core kind of skills. I mean, your skills you can learn all the time, right? You're learning skills at Berkeley that you probably never thought that you would even need, whether it's social science and you're physical scientist, or whether or not you're learning coding because like you have to learn coding nowadays, or maybe you're finding that you need to learn business. Skills can be acquired. And the thing is, acquire those skills for a purpose. And so really kind of think about ways you can have your purpose. I mean, I could explain, Kathy, let me know if you want me to kind of explain a little bit more details about what CoolClimate does. We basically develop data, software, programs, and we do outreach. And I could kind of explain a little bit more about that. If you're ready.
Of course. So I think I put that on a different slide. So let's just proceed. It's totally fine. And then now we can dig more into what CoolClimate is. But before that, so I know Chris because I applied to the URAP program. So I put it over here as undergraduate research apprentice program, because I don't know what I want to do. But one thing that I know I want to do is not sit here and do nothing. So you just have to get up and go out and try a bunch of things and see if it fits you. And I would say, let me see. Yeah, just a little bit recap about what URAP is so people can have an idea. So it's like a program here at Berkeley. So as an undergraduate of any year, you can apply to a wild range of different projects. So there are subjects in CS, econ, HAS, cognitive science, chemistry, psychology, political science, etc., etc. Like I think usually around a month before the start of the term, they will release a list of projects, and you can go in and see there's a lot of project descriptions and what kind of people they want, how many they want, and that is how I joined EcoDataLab. So we're going to talk about that like in a minute. But yeah, and I think Chris, we could elaborate more about research at Berkeley and why you should do it and what kind of things you can learn from it.
Well, so let me first say, like, when I was an undergraduate, I waited tables, and during my 20s, I spent my time traveling, doing all kinds of different things, and so I certainly had no idea what I wanted to do. And I can say that had I known about programs like URAP, I would have done things very differently. The experience that you get through URAP and the experience you get through undergraduate research counts. These are years of experience that you can get a huge head start on others by really getting real world tangible experience. In fact, the undergraduates do better work in many cases than the graduate students. That's very clear. So you can get actual experience. You can learn skills and then apply those skills to like real world problems. So I think it's a huge opportunity. Had I known that had the program existed when I was an undergrad, I would have just benefited immensely from it. And I would say that when you're looking at grad school applications or to hire somebody, if they can kind of explain what they've done through their undergraduate research and show how they've contributed, don't just say I was interning in this lab, like elaborate on what you did, show off a little bit. That's what your CV is for. So like explain what role you had and what you did and what you accomplished. And that's like a real accomplishment. So this program, EcoDataLab, is training students in data science. They kind of train each other, or really just use the resources at Berkeley to kind of quickly get up to speed on their data science skills and then apply them. So this is, I should go back a little bit. What was the genesis of EcoDataLab? It was one of these huge ideas. It was the best example I could come up with of where's a place where students can contribute to a huge problem that is massively underfunded, that is massively overlooked, that has a tremendous potential. And so the idea here is, now here we are in 2020. We've known about climate change and it's the severity of it for 40 years. And we know now that local governments and households and businesses have at least over 1/3 of the total reductions needed to stabilize our climate have to happen at local levels, the city level. There's a lot of policies that just cannot be implemented except at the city level. And so cities are trying to figure out what they can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but they don't even have the data. They don't know where their emissions are coming from. And if they're lucky enough to have a sustainability officer, hired, employed, the best that they can do to collect their data is to write a grant to hire a consultant if they get lucky and pay like $100,000 to hire a consultant. It's ridiculous. We're trying to solve climate change and we don't even have the data in front of us. We don't even know our starting point. We don't know which actions lead to the most reductions. This is 2020. This is ridiculous. And so people, just like when I started 15 years ago or 20 years ago, people didn't even know what a carbon footprint was. Like, what is the average carbon footprint? Nobody knew what that was. Today, cities are in the same situation. They don't know where their emissions are, like what they're from. They've tracked them over time. This is pathetic. This is ridiculous because here we have, so what we decided to do is treat this like a data science problem. Whereas before, cities are really trying to treat this like a management problem, like who can we hire, and then how can we write a grant, and then to go out and collect the data. Data science can solve this problem. But where's the money for it? Well, we applied for a big grant for the state, and we didn't get the grant. We were very close to getting the grant. We were finalists. At the end of the day, we didn't get the big grant. So I just said, let's just have students do it. Like, we're not going to wait for a grant. We're just going to get this project done. And so URAP just kind of fell into my lap. So we started in URAP 3 years ago. We started getting students to learn data science and just go out and collect, process, clean, analyze, and now visualize. We're now finally to the point where we're like visualizing the data. So cities can actually put in the name of their city and all of the charts and all of the figures just like pop up for their city. And we've done this while teaching students, but I think the main thing, students train themselves, but we're really putting that to really good use. This is just, for me, just one example of a way in which you can use your talents and put it to good use. I think I highly recommend going through the URAP applications, kind of looking at projects where you can make a real contribution. There's some very, very cool projects out there.
Yeah.
So if
I
you
just want to add. Yeah.
Go ahead. I mean, I have a few slides if you want me to show them, but yeah, this is a conversation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I actually pulled up the EcoDataLab website so people can see what it's like. But I just want to add. So I joined EcoDataLab the second semester of my the first semester of my sophomore year or so, but it's sophomore year, and then it's really extraordinary that you can see yourself grow from one semester or just 2 semesters. And I just want to clarify for people who think research is a really daunting term. It was for me as well. It felt to me like research is a bunch of people wearing white, suits and stuff, and they're holding, lab coats, and they're having the goggles in and pull stuff together. But it's totally not like that, especially for research in data science. It's more like, well, I can just explain like how we did it. Basically, I walk into the room, there was Chris, we say hi, and then we set a time so that people can meet each other. And then we're handled with R, which I don't know what that is. Well, that's a thing. And then he's like, okay, so we're going to learn this together. So as a group, we kind of learn the language R together. And after we learned it together, there was like a bunch of tasks. So we can choose, and we were assigned with the energy team. So we were trying to figure out how to process a bunch of data and energy in R. So that was pretty similar to what you would have done if you have taken data 8 or data 100 or stats 20. I think 20 was for R. It's almost like really the same, like creating a homework problem, solving a homework problem, and then you go this step by step. It's not just like ask you to do fancy regression like out of everything. It's just that it goes step by step, and you learn something from this project, or maybe you are able to utilize the things that you learn in other classes, because it's not only about data science, about analyzing, it's also about, we did the Figma designs. So we tried to design a website, and that was really cool. I'd never done that before. And there was also a lot of things that you could watch people in CS do, because I remember there was a team in JavaScript, and they were doing all the fancy stuff that I really didn't know or cannot really imagine, but it's always cool to see other people do their things, and just really, really cool. You get to, meet a lot of people and see something being done like at your hands. And I think it really goes step inside, and I really recommend you guys to choose the one that you're really interested in and follow that research for, I don't know, like I think for me, like at least 2 or 3 semesters, because that's when you start to realize how far you've grown and as well as the program has. Because I remember at the first day I went into the meeting, and I remember Chris was asking, how was your experience with coding? I was like, none. And then he's like, that's fine. But then after a semester and you taking, I don't know, CS 61B or something, and then you suddenly realize I am very capable. I'm very potent to do things that's on my hands. And it's just really amazing thing to do. So Chris, do you want to like share your screen? So if you have
Sure.
something to share? Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, this will be something that you haven't seen yet, Kathy. So
Oh, okay.
the version there is EcoDataLab version 1, and we haven't been supporting that for a little while now. I'm going to show you version 2. So let's
Okay.
see
Let me just
here.
stop. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the project that Kathy's working on typically looks something like this. Like we're just collecting data. I mean, these are data that I'm showing in a Google sheet, and but most of the project was all working in R, and then you kind of, clean, process, analyze the data, and you kind of spit it out into a CSV file. And then what we ended up doing was just uploading these CSV files into a Google sheet. And then we had the JavaScript team, or the carbon coders. They are using the Google API to query this Google sheet, which we made public. And then I have this really cool spreadsheet here. And all I have to do if I want to create a chart in our software is just basically fill out the data here, like say where the chart lives and like what type of chart I want to create and where I want it to show up. And then it just magically shows up in our software. So I see I have a bug here in one of the data because it's like per employee, and I've got a bug there with my per employee. But these charts are just automatically pulled from that Google sheet. And I could say this is like, we could do like, let's see, Los Angeles County and the data change. And we have, energy data, transportation data, consumption, which is a project that I work on, greenhouse gas inventory, census data, other data. We're starting to pull in some of these other tools here, like our carbon calculators and our policy tools. So this has all been developed with student energy, and now we've got actually members across California, and we even have across the United States. We're starting to get other members. Ultimately, we want the software to be fully and professionally developed. And so what we did for that is we started a company now, a company called EcoDataLab, and so where the company just developing the software. It's really hard to pay programmers through the university. So what we did is ended up like paying the student programmers, like became professional programmers now. And through the company, we can hire them much more easily. And then we donate the software back to Berkeley. It's kind of a tricky way for us like to hire students and develop like professionally. We also hire professional developers as well, and we can kind of make a spin-off of this project and develop into it like a professional project. So this is version 2.0, which is our research project. And then 3.0 is like developed through the company with part student labor and part professional labor. So this is pretty cool. We just have like these different chart types. And so if I were to like add in right now, like I said, like another row here, it would just like instantly pop in a different chart. We're also doing maps, and we have many different kind of chart types, and it's all into the software. So this is one piece of the software we're developing for cities. Another piece is, I'm going to mention the CoolClimate calculator. We can access it right through here in EcoDataLab. So this is the carbon calculator that we've been developing now continuously since 2003. And this is the EcoDataLab research is powering this tool. Actually, the best way to show you this would be through a little bit on the research side through a little slideshow here. So just kind of going back to, first of all, we try to build tools at all of these scales to influence people as individuals, through their interpersonal relationships, through their peers, at their places of work, in their cities or their communities, and at the public policy level. And so this is the carbon footprint that I mentioned before. This is like the first carbon footprint estimate I did way back in like 2005. And then what we've done over the years is really improve this and extend upon this. So here's the typical US carbon footprint. Here is the global average carbon footprint. So that's like 80% below where we currently are. And to stabilize a climate, we need to get 80% below that. So here's the US, here's California. So you see how the carbon footprints really change a lot. Here's if you live in St. Louis. Here's if you live in different parts of the Bay Area, even down to the neighborhood scale, we can see an up to 5 times difference between the size of the carbon footprints in one neighborhood versus the other, just in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so some of the students are working on developing these models. It's econometric models that we're using to estimate carbon footprints. And what we mean by that is we're estimating consumption. How much meat do people buy? How much energy? How much public transit? How much do they use their vehicle? How big is their home? And how much stuff do they purchase for their home? So the way we do that is we use data that we know. We collect all the data that we know at local levels to build up our models. And so here's an example of data for San Francisco on census data, how many vehicles people own. They own very few vehicles here and quite a few vehicles in this area of San Francisco. Household size, very few people per household here, lots of people per household out here. Income kind of varies a little bit throughout the San Francisco, but pretty low down in the in this area, and higher incomes down here. And so and population density is kind of the inverse. And so when you put that together, it perhaps is no surprise that low carbon footprints are down here in the kind of the financial and downtown area, and the higher carbon footprints are down in this southern part of the city. So in order to do this for every city and every location in the United States, we need to collect a lot of data, but we also want to show the data over time, see how carbon footprints change over time, see how greenhouse gas emissions change over time. Here's the entire Bay Area down at the block group or neighborhood scale. And so this is kind of just a slide on our econometric models. So what we do is, this is some showing a table here from R generated, but we have 37 categories of consumption. And then these are some variables at the top, independent variables that affect consumption. So household size, the more people you have in your home, really contributes to how much food people eat and how much clothing people have. Whereas income, these are elasticities. Income has very little impact on how much food people are eating or how much, well, clothing to some degree, but certainly food has very little impact. Whereas like the size of your home affects, of course, your energy, but also how much stuff you have in your home. And if you own the home, that affects how much stuff you basically have in your home. One of them that's really interesting is college degree. If you have a college degree, controlling for all these other variables, so given the same household size, given the same income, given the same size of home and home ownership, people with a college degree tend to spend more on, I guess, social status or items that contribute to social status, such as education, entertainment, travel. People tend to spend more money if they're higher educated. So we can build these maps for the whole US. And then we can build these tools like the carbon calculator that I was just about to show you. So to get a decision-making tool like the carbon calculator, there's a lot of work that goes into it, because what we want people to be able to do is put in their city or their zip code. So you can put in California and get the average carbon footprint there, or you can put in like Berkeley and get the carbon footprint there. And you can say, look, I live in this zip code, so there's my carbon footprint. And then you can adjust how many people in the household. So you might have a lot of people in the household and a low income. Food is going to be the largest part of your carbon footprint. This is very similar to like a student household. So you might even have a car. So food, you're eating all day long, basically. So food is a big part of your carbon footprint. But if you're a high income person with only one person in your home, food is a small part of your carbon footprint. So people can kind of go through and use the tool. We give them a default setting. They say, most households like you have 2 vehicles, and you can say, I only have 1 electric vehicle. So my carbon footprint looks like that. Kind of go through and adjust the tool based on their own individual information, and then get a personalized climate action plan at the end. Another project that we work on is that, really importantly, is not just your own individual carbon footprint, but at the organizational level. So one project I think is be fun to tell you about is a behavior change project that's coming up. We also have data science students working on this project. And so this is called the Cool Campus Challenge. We ran this in 2019. And what this is a program to encourage people to take climate action and then share those stories of what they're doing with others in a gamified experience. And so this is the software. You go on and you can take a number of different actions. And then when you take the action, you upload a photo, you say whether or not you've already done it, or if it's new to you, or whether you do it at home or do it at work. And then it shows up in an activity feed, very much like an Instagram or Facebook post. And we can kind of like the post, you can comment on the post. And when this is active, this program, it's like, every minute we have got people posting to this activity feed. And you have your own personal page where it shows all your actions. You've got team pages. Here's the EcoDataLab page. Anyway, then there's a competition. This was actually a competition between all 10 University of California campuses. And we got 7% of all students across all 10 campuses to participate. And that was over 22,000 people participated. And the great thing for me is that we, on average, got people to take 10 actions per person. So it's not just that they signed up for the program, it's that they're really actively involved in the program. And this semester, we have a bunch of EcoDataLab students contributing to this software to make it much more fun and much more engaging. We're trying to automate carbon footprints. So based on your phone, we can see where you're traveling, and we'll give you points based on if you're walking, if you're biking, or taking public transit. And we can see if you're driving your car and how much emissions you have from that. And we're trying to automate carbon footprints, well, in a really easy way, just by having a scavenger hunt around campus. So we're gonna have these QR codes, and you have to decipher where these things are, and then you find it, and you scan it and instantly get points. And so, yeah, we can also enter your energy bills and other things. So we're really using the students to kind of find fun and new creative ways to contribute to that. And we also develop policy tools. So at the policy level, for every city, based on all of that data that we collected for all the cities, now we're able to develop these really robust policy tools. So based on data like this, we can then say, well, which actions will contribute to the most to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? So we published this paper a couple of years ago, and now there's this really cool policy tool where you can put in the name of your city or your zip code or even your neighborhood, and it'll show you which actions, which policy actions will contribute to the greenhouse gas reductions. So yeah, so those are some of the tools that we're working on. It all comes though from the data side. So we start by collecting the data, and then we build software, and then ultimately we realize we need to do programs and policy. So our data and our tools are contributing to policy in California, and ultimately we hope to contribute to policy in other states as well. But one of the policies that we're contributing to right now, which has been proposed several years now, is the last 3 years since we published the study, is to encourage urban infill in California, because you'll see for places like San Francisco, the best thing that San Francisco can do that we find, and same with Berkeley, Berkeley's really just off the charts here, is the best thing that Berkeley can do is to put more people in Berkeley, because their carbon footprints are lower than if they lived somewhere else, even at the same income level. So that having visualization tools like this and having those maps has really made it very transparent to people and to policymakers and to individuals and organizations, which actions contribute the most to potential reductions. It all comes from data science, and it all comes from collecting, analyzing, dredging through the data. Kathy's worked on the code at the most minute detail and tried to uncover a bunch of bugs, and it can be really frustrating, but it can be really rewarding too, right? Because once you solve those problems in data science, they're kind of solved forever. You have written that code, and that is the code now that's going to be powering our tools. And Kathy developed some really important work for our program on the energy side. I'm really excited, Kathy, to follow up to get your data up into EcoDataLab.
Great. Let me see.
And just to let you know, I did write down like 10 pieces of advice I have for students. So at some point, I'll be happy to give those to you.
Yeah, we'll definitely get those. Let me see.
I can stop my share now.
Yeah, cool. Good. So after we have kind of shared how to build your interest and also how to learn more skills to support your interest, so we're now going to a more career kind of side of it. So well, let me just tell you what I thought. So when I was thinking about grad school, one of the advice that I was given by other people was that you need to do something in research, especially when you are, majoring in, well, not necessarily like econ or CS, but more like if you want to go on a path with like a specific science, it's always good to show the people that you are really passionate about it, and you have like stepped your foot into that area and you realize that that's actually something you want. And research is one of the ways that you can prove to the committee that you have tried and you can actually do well in. So I have listed a bunch of questions. So I would really appreciate it if Chris, you could like elaborate on these questions, and also if you want to like add something more, that would be totally fine.
Sure. These are great questions. Yeah, I mean, research can definitely contribute to a grad school application in a very positive way. And there's kind of no reason, I guess, not to, given like URAP and all these opportunities. And so I highly recommend that you do get involved in some research projects and being able to explain them kind of, astutely, and give a really not only contribute to the project, but explain like what was your contribution to the project. And that's important, and not just to say I was in the lab, which is great already, that's going to set you apart. But if you can say I was in the lab and I did this, which was like my unique thing, it really can set you apart. So please do get involved and experiment. URAP is a great way to do it, but you don't have to do URAP. URAP, you get credits, but we have a lot of students who volunteer not through URAP. In fact, Kathy this summer worked with us, just volunteering. I've always said, like, for my career also, when you find what you want to do, just go volunteer to do it. And if you're good at it, eventually they'll hire you to do it, right? So you can find ways to do what you want to do. And if nobody's hiring you to do it, just do it anyway. And so there's a lot of opportunities to get out there and make a contribution. But yes, research is beneficial. Now, publishing a paper, very rarely do students actually have published papers when they get to graduate school, although it asks you for your publications. If you do not have a publication, it's okay. But having your name somewhere down on a paper, even if you're like the 5th author or whatever, is good. It shows that you know how to contribute meaningfully to a project. A lot of times you'll participate in a project and not end up on a paper because you're not making an intellectual contribution to the paper. So sometimes you'll be recognized in the credits, right, in the acknowledgement, and most of the time that's usually what happens. Is a student will just kind of do what they're told and maybe like make a graphic or like maybe do some little data analysis or something and not really like make an intellectual contribution to it. So to actually be an author in a paper is kind of a big deal. You have to really truly be a contributor to that paper and not just be like on the team. And so that's why it's not a requirement, but it's great if you can get to that level and actually have a paper. And it doesn't have to be a peer-reviewed published paper as well. You can do a student paper, you can do, contribute to journalistically, you can write things, anything that you can do that's showing that your ideas you want to put them out in the real world, that all counts and is all helpful. In fact, that's the first thing they're going to do when they see your application is, let's see what this person thinks. Let's see how they think. Let's see what they're writing. And it doesn't have to be a peer-reviewed academic paper. Most of the papers that I write, in fact, are white papers or professional papers and don't end up being peer-reviewed academic papers. So there's a whole spectrum of writing that you can do. And yes, it is really helpful. So the same subject for research as graduate school, I think for some fields, that's probably the case. For most of the fields that I'm involved with, is actually not even desirable to have, like, I'm in the energy field and I've always done energy and that's what I know. Or like, I'm just like the electricity person and I've been doing this my whole life. We want breadth. And I think most departments nowadays want breadth and diversity. Our department at URG was founded on physicists and they ended up doing social science. So, like 3 of them were all physicists and ended up doing energy and social science stuff. So I think, multidisciplinarity nowadays is like the norm. In my opinion, it's not only just like, it's kind of like expected nowadays. So I wouldn't shy away from, doing another degree and then applying to some other degree, if you can show competency in that degree, if you can show interest in that degree. So a great way to show competency in that is after undergrad, go out and work in a field that's more in line with what you want to do in graduate school. I would say that's more important than what your undergraduate degree was. But some fields, that's not the case. If you're a computer science, it's great that you're a computer scientist. But if you're doing math or you're doing statistics or something, that's just as good too. because you can show your competency in it. Or I'll have another example, which I think is really a fun one. So my roommate in college was a pretty brilliant programmer. I mean, he may have been like literally genius. He's a very, very smart person. And he was like coding his whole life. And in high school, he was coding, actually working at Lawrence Berkeley Lab and getting paid a lot of money working for them in high school. And he had that job during college. And he always figured, you know, his parents, everybody figured he'd be a computer programmer because he was brilliant at it. He was doing 3D, this was back in the early 90s. He was doing like 3D medical stuff, like, because nobody else knew how to do it. So he's like doing 3D imaging for like medical procedures. And he was just doing this as a side job, like doing college. And then I think I had some influence on him and trying to tell him to follow his passions, you know, and he wasn't passionate about sitting behind a computer all day. And so he blamed me kind of for ended up becoming a film major. He and I took a couple film classes together and, you know, he ended up doing film. And so, yeah, so how did that turn out? Well, he's now runs a really well-respected video game company, which merged all of his skills together, right? So he was doing story. He had no idea he didn't even play video games in college, but it ended up being like pulling those passions together and into something that was really productive. So I would say, you know, follow what you want to do. As a major in undergrad, I don't think it's that important. It's more important like kind of what you do between undergraduate and graduate school. And I do recommend taking a couple years to get out there and do some work, maybe contribute to some company or do an internship, or maybe it's doing your own thing. Maybe it's like doing a little startup company and bootstrapping something, or just doing it with no money or whatever. That can show that like I'm contributing in this field. Another thing for graduate school, and for research, as obvious as it may seem, just read the papers of the people that you're applying to. Like if I have an undergraduate researcher who's actually read one of my papers, I'm just like blown away. And if they can ask me an intelligent question about it, I'm just like, you're just like 95 percentile already. So like actually understand the research and maybe ask some intelligent questions about it. Take the time to do it, right? It's really important. It's just like office hours, right? Take the time to go to office hours. That's one of the tricks that's really important. I do have, though, a few other little recommendations. They are around graduate school. If you want me to.
Do you want to like elaborate on them? Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, I've been mentioning a bunch of these already. I think, yeah, get the experience early and get lots of different types of experience. So that we've already been talking about that, and you can absolutely do that through URAP or through your own initiatives. I think one thing that's really important, which I want to impress upon you, is that we are living in, well, I think, as you know, I imagine that your stress level is so much higher than any other previous generation. In the course of your lifetimes, you've lived through, some of you, like 9/11, the economic crash, the Great Recession. You're starting to experience climate change. Now we've got COVID, we've got polarization politically. We have all this uncertainty about the future. And so, you know, you're living in really difficult times. And in terms of climate change, I feel like we're basically like careening off a cliff as a society very quickly. And people are just like on their cell phones and they're just like, what can I do with my career, and trying to think about some marginal contribution they're going to make. We need to make really big changes, and we need to make them really quickly. And it's not just for climate change, it's restructuring our economy to be more sustainable. It's thinking of new ways of solving problems, or information technology is hopefully coming at the right time to help us solve a bunch of those problems. But I don't want to see you wasting your skills, your talent on making some marginal contribution. And I think this goes to your topic here, is that so there is a huge, getting to the bamboo ceiling, there is a huge underrepresentation of Asian Americans and Asians in leadership positions in corporations and in academia and all over the place, and while simultaneously an overrepresentation in talent. And what I do not want to see anybody do, especially those involved in this organization, is to make a marginal contribution. But unfortunately, that's exactly what graduate school trains you to do. They train you to be marginal. They train you to find this one little niche of one little problem that only a handful of researchers care about, and write up lengthy papers describing each step of the methodology that you use to answer this problem, that at the end of the day, is it solving our huge problems? It may be contributing marginally to information, but how is it helping society solve these big problems? And I would like to see you use your talents to really think about some of those big ideas and to really go after them. I mean, you haven't made those decisions yet. You haven't made those decisions in your career that's kind of going to put you and pigeonhole you into one spot. One other thing I can say is that for your careers, if you're just getting a job that 50 other people are applying for, and you get that job, and then you don't do the job better than the next person, the 49th person, whoever didn't get your job, if you're not doing your job better than that person who didn't get your job, you're not actually even helping at all, you're hurting. So please don't just be marginal. Please find a way to be leaders. Find a way to be in a leadership position where you're making a unique contribution to solving big problems. And I think that Berkeley gives you all the tools and assets to do that, and start experimenting, even in small ways. Starting your own club, starting your own project, doing your own research with your own ideas and pursuing those, but doing them really, really well. You always have to pursue excellence. So whatever you do, just be the best at it. This is life advice I got years ago. I didn't appreciate it, really understand it at the time. So, but somebody who was very successful when I was waiting tables way back when said, it doesn't matter what you do, just be the best at it and you will be successful. And I think I have found that has been really sage advice. And how you be the best at something, it's not going to be just like one thing. You really become the best when you start building lots of different skills and you're able to apply those to a single objective. So that's why I think it is important to have breadth of your skill set, and to, you don't have to know now what you're going to do. I didn't know until I was in my 30s, right? But you start building those skill sets so that you can kind of apply them in some way that's unique. Another thing, when you do get in a career, just kind of build on strength. So like my friend who was doing these seemingly polar opposite things of programming and film, ended up doing coding, like video games. He was building on that strength that he'd already created. So find a way to build on your strengths and to increase those and to leverage all of those skills. Integrate your talents, follow your passions is pretty obvious. Ultimately, one day, if there's something that you really care about, and what I mean by what you care about, it's what you think about, like when you're not working. Like if you find a problem that you care so passionate about that you find yourself thinking about it, even when you're not being paid to do it, then that's a passion. So find something that you're really curious and want to do. Eventually, once you find that, just keep your eye on that prize kind of and work towards that, because people are going to throw all types of obstacles in front of you. And that's how you become successful. It may not be the path that you're thinking. It doesn't matter how many obstacles. The more obstacles, the better, because even if you get knocked down, you'll find a way to go around those obstacles to find ultimately what you want to do. A way that you can accomplish this, however, is to not all put all of your eggs in one basket. So research can be a real problem. There are lots of horror stories in academia. I'm very critical of academia, even though I work in academia. I think we're training people to be marginal, as I've mentioned. But you can also really get students to spend years of their career and then in some experiment that ultimately isn't successful. But we want people to take risks. We encourage you to take risks to some degree, but then if it doesn't pan out, that shouldn't be a huge setback for you, right? Like we expected it to work and it didn't. That was learning, and that was enough. That was good enough, and we should just be able to go forward. But there are kind of horror stories of projects that just fail and students don't get their degree. So how do you avoid that? By not putting all of your eggs in one basket, by kind of like having several ways of getting you to the finish line. That being said, you could just go to a professor, find some research project that they're working on and say, hey, I'm good at these skills, I can do this. That's an okay path. That's training you to be, it's giving you a lot of skills. It's the standard path. Just find a professor with money and like do their work for them. And so they can get most of the credit. If that's the path you want to go, that you get a degree out of it, it's okay. But if you can really show leadership if you can really try to do your own thing, if you, even if it's, you have to fund it or in creative ways, when someone goes to hire you, they're gonna have way more respect for you, and you're gonna learn way more if you do your own thing. So even if you're working for a professor, work for a professor that's gonna give you some flexibility to, be creative, have a creative input in what you're doing. Yeah, I guess that's enough. And I certainly haven't figured it all out, right? But I should say that I think of myself as having like 5 jobs right now, because I'm always trying to diversify as well. So I do have a full-time job as research director at CoolClimate, but now we started this company. I also do consulting work. I rent out rooms. I run a conference. I have this internship program, like as a separate job that nobody even pays me for, but I just think it's really important. So like I've always got, they're all building on the same thing, but I'm not just sticking with one thing, because you could lose your job pretty easily, in crazy times. So, I'm diversified myself.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And let's see, does anyone have any questions for Chris? You could either type in the chat, you could just unmute yourself and say it out loud.
And anyone want to call me on any of this? Like, I try to be provocative a little bit, but,
Yeah, I guess I had a really quick question just about like the start of your journey. So you said that you were originally like mastered in Latin American studies, and then you like got an energy and resource degree, and then like now you're using data science like to combat like the carbon footprint. So how did like these major, I guess, changes in direction of your journey affect you? Like, were you looking for change, or did it just come to you?
That's such a good, thoughtful question. Thank you. It all happened really organically. And so I came to do, forestry, and I ended up not working that first year in graduate school, because they had told me, your first year of graduate school, you shouldn't work. And so I took out student loans, and I ended up having this crazy semester where I took tropical ecology, business management, like it was like a MBA for graduates in like a semester or whatever kind of thing. Not MBA, but like business 101. And I was doing Portuguese literature, and I was doing a course at Energy and Resources Group, which was really influential for me, and some other random class. I can't even remember what it was, but all these classes that seemed to be so apart from each other, but they ended up actually all being kind of about the same thing ultimately, because I was doing a business and I was learning a business, and it was about, forestry as a part of climate change, and I needed the environmental science side of it. And ultimately it was the ecological economics class that I took at that semester that made me think of the carbon calculator. So I think I needed all those background and all those different areas to like have the aha moment of, how can I solve this problem of forestry? And I'm learning about ecological economics and business, and then the carbon calculator idea came to me, and I was able to kind of like fit it in. So that's the great thing about Berkeley. I was taking classes actually at UC Davis. I live in Davis, so before I went to Berkeley, and I remember so I was like 30 at the time, and I remember it was really hard for me to find any classes that I was interested in. And then I looked at the Berkeley catalog, and I calculated I would be 95 years old before I took all the classes that I wanted to take at Berkeley. And then that was back then, and like since then, it's grown dramatically. So there's just so much at your fingertips at Berkeley, so many classes, and so I really recommend taking some breadth. And that's what happened to me in my master's program. I thought I was coming in to do forestry, got excited about all these things, and just like, okay, I'm going to take them. And then, with no real reason exactly why I was doing it. I mean, kind of, and then it led me down a totally different path.
Yeah, I actually just want to add up, because obviously I didn't have like Chris, who have like 20 years of doing something. I only have like 3 years of doing something. But it's, for me, I just realized it's always really interesting when you kind of jump out of your, I don't want to say comfort zone because that word is so used, but it's so true. And I remember thinking to myself when I was in the summer of my freshman year, like, what should I do? I don't want to, spend the summer doing nothing. And back then I was thinking, oh, maybe I want to get an internship. But then I realized that I don't really know anything as a freshman because you enter and then you learn some algebra. And then I was kind of having doubts, like, what can I do if I only know algebra? And I don't want to waste my time, doing some, I don't know, like formatting of a PowerPoint or making coffee. Well, that might have been some use, like if you're really interested in coffee, but and then I just look into what Berkeley could offer. And I just want to tell you that Berkeley can offer way more than you can imagine it to be. And I just kind of searched for things to do in the summer. And there was a summer abroad program. I always wanted to do a abroad program in something that I didn't thought of it would be my career path because it's always more interesting to look at something when it's just a hobby instead of like your life depends on it. It's always fun and always very flexible and interesting when you don't rely on it for, making a living. And then I just end up going to Spain, which is something I never thought of, for 2 months and learning architecture and urban design. And I have been doing fine arts for like almost a decade at that time, and I always saw this as a side interest that I just do for fun. And I just thought it would be cool if you could draw something really to life. And then I just went to Spain for 2 months, and also I had the chance to go to Morocco, which is something I really recommend you guys to do. It's really fun, and it just gives you I can't really explain it. I don't want to say like giving you a new perspective because that we're so used, but it does give you a different idea of things. Like I remember the professor always used to say that Alex, like he was our professor at the summer course, he always tells us the best way of getting to know a city is to get lost in a city. So our job, I visited like 12 or 13 cities in Spain. Sadly, not Barcelona because they were having some kind of football games, and our professor thought it would be really dangerous for us to just go. And I went to these cities, and the only assignment that we have is to go lost and go lawn and just go whatever you want, but go back to the youth hostels at the end of the night, and you see all these things that you can't really imagine because you don't know that existed. All those I always thought Spain is really close to the European culture, but then it was not. If especially you go to the southern part of it, it's really similar to what you would have thought for Middle Asia or North Africa, and it's so different. Even you just go from Madrid to somewhere south like Granada, and it's so different. I can't explain it. And you see all these new things, and you get new ideas when you look at a city. Like always, the professor always told us to do not look at a city as a tourist. Look at it as a architect. So you want to see all those structures. You want to think instead of wow, how beautiful is it, but what kind of function does it serve, why it was there, what kind of story may relate to it. Like use your imaginations, explain the things around you, and kind of not necessarily explain, understand, try to feel it, explain it through your way. And it was just so interesting to see architecture, archaeology, and I actually had a chance to visit an archaeology site for the Phoenicians and Islamic culture. It was so interesting, and it was like 2 BC or something. It was really old, and I had a chance to touch it, but if it becomes a site, you can't really touch it. So that's really fun. But anyway, that was all to tell you guys that you could go towards something you feel like you're not going to do for the rest of your life, and that's what college is for. You can, get I actually had something in my mind because UC Davis offers a really fun summer program that fly you to France and teach you about wine, but you have to be 21 to participate in that. But I have my eyes on that, and you just go and see things you never seen before, and then suddenly, bam! I am a landscape architecture major, and not major, minor, but it just gives you a new kind of idea, and then it's really hard to explain, but I think it's totally worth it to go explore the breadth that you've never seen before. Yeah. And we have Rebecca in the chat, and she asked, what do you think is the biggest barrier to trying to get into research?
There really aren't any at Berkeley. I mean, you have so many opportunities to get involved with research. I guess that perhaps having the right skills, that might be a barrier. So data science is such a good skill to have. So if you're good at data science, it's easier to get an internship. But maybe just writing a good application. And remember, here's a real trick. If you want to get into any URAP project, just actually read one of the professor's papers and you'll get the job. Like, read the paper and like put some questions in there about the paper and say what kind of skills you have or the skills that you want to learn. Even if you don't have the skills, say, I would like to learn, really like to learn these skills. I read your paper about this, or I like your research, or whatever. But there are no barriers at Berkeley. I mean, okay, if you need money, if you want a paid research position, then that's a barrier. Like I had to pay for my, I worked 30 hours a week as an undergrad and waiting tables, and had to pay for my schooling and my tuition and my, living and all that. So that was a barrier for me, as that just financially, I thought it was hard to do, but I could have found a way to do it. So yeah, nothing to it but to do it. Just go out there and get involved.
Yeah, definitely. Any other question?
Yeah, I actually have one for Chris. So first off, thank you for your time. Come to us, talk about your project and your experience. And I think a lot of what you mentioned about your energy research and carbon footprint reminded me of my professor, Scott Mora. He's been doing a lot of the energy. You know him, great, yeah. Mm-hmm. Energy charging, battery management, that sort of thing. So I just wanted to ask you, what is kind of your opinion, your take on, California making the assigning to a law that by 2035 there will be no new sales of combustion engine vehicles. What do you think about in terms of kind of the state, how to adjust the charging infrastructure and balancing the source of the new source of electricity that's going to meet the demand and that sort of thing?
Well, that policy is a total game changer. This is the idea of it's not incrementalism. All of our the previous mentality was always, let's make cars more efficient. And then it was like, let's have electric vehicles and we'll just find ways to get them, adopted, and they're not being adopted. This was like complete game changer. We're just not going to allow any more vehicles, combustion engine vehicles. This is the direction that policy is taking, but it is way ahead of the science to support it. So this is the question that you're bringing up. If you live in multifamily home and you don't have a garage, and like, where do you park your vehicle in the street? Like, how are you going to charge it? And how does the grid going to be able to handle all these vehicles? And the expense around it, nobody's really costed it out. I mean, okay, people are starting to cost out the transformation that would be needed, but where's all the money that's going to go and completely transform our grid? How do we make that grid smarter? How do we make the vehicles be battery storage for the grid, and kind of all these technical challenges? I mean, I think this is probably the right way to go about doing it, would be to like set this really ambitious policy, even though it doesn't have the science to support how we can actually get there. It's okay to do that, I think, as long as they're willing to fund it. I don't see the funding there being in place, unfortunately, in time to make that that transition easy. It's going to be hard, and so we need a lot of smart people to try to figure out how to do this effectively. But yeah, it's a great example of being game-changing policy. Same thing for natural gas. It's always been, we want to just like have more efficient natural gas, but now, like, Berkeley, the city of Berkeley was the first city to say, no more, any new building cannot have natural gas in it. And then the next policy is going to be, even like, you cannot install a natural gas heating system. It's got to be an electric system, so a heat pump system. So we basically just have to like ban fossil fuels. But there are so many challenges to making that transition effective and cost effective. And that gets to your point. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of good work that needs to be done to make that effective. Just as an example, all the fires that are starting because of these transformers going out, and there's something like 30,000 transformers, I think, if I remember, that PG&E owns, and they're mostly old. and there's not even enough money to get PG&E to replace the transformers. And so what are they doing? They're just shutting off the grid. And you're experiencing all these blackouts, right? We wouldn't have to have these blackouts if there was enough money just to replace the grid, but we're not doing it, right? So yeah, this is what I mean by like we're just like careening off the cliff as a society, and we need to take big jumps, big leaps like that policy. And then we gotta figure out how to make it work practically.
Cool, thank you, Chris. So any other question? If no, all right, everyone, let's give a round of applause to Chris, either virtually or you can do it on your own. Thank you, Chris, for coming.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's great to meet some of you, and I wish we had a chance to connect a little bit more in person so I could learn more about you. Typically, I'd want to hear all about you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sure. You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.